Yoel said to me that we got up to the end of the three Hilchos below time. So that means we're about, give or take, 11 lines from the top. We're up to Amrle Rab on Yudalat Amanal. Amrle Rab L'Rav Bardala.
Yep.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. We are starting. Today's daf is daf Yudalid. We are starting, give or take, about 11 lines from the top. Amrle Rab L'Rav Bardala, and hopefully we will finish the parak. No, thank you very much. And hopefully we will finish the parak. So we are still in the sugya, I think, of Ma'amid Shlashim. So either way, Amrle Rav L'Rav Bardala. Kaba de Morika Isli Gabach. I've got you owe me a kav of saffron. Yavila Ploni. And so give it to Ploni. This kav of saffron that you owe to me, give it to Ploni. And Ba'ape Ka'aminalach, and he's sitting right here with us. I'm saying this in the presence of him. So the three of us are in one room. Delo Hajarnabi. And I'm doing it that way so that I won't retract. Now, the bottom line is, not, but importantly, Oz, it's not that I can't be choser. I'm doing it this way, so like I'll be almost like pressured not to be choser. The Gemara is going to ask, like, what do you mean? So first of all, before we even, it's a Ma'amid Shlashim, but the chiddush here, or at least the case here, I don't know much about saffron. Apparently, this is not very valuable. That's kind of the takeaway here. But the Gemara says from the lashon that he used. From the lashon that he used of like I'm doing it so that I won't retract, Miklal the Ibai Hadarbe. It almost sounds like Miklal the Ibai Hadarbe Matzar Hadarbe. It almost sounds like if he wanted to, he could retract. He's almost saying, I'm doing it this way so that I won't retract. But again, if it's Ma'amid Shlashim, he can't retract. So why is he even making it sound like he has the ability to retract? The Gemara says no. Yes.
Different than all the other.
No, well, it's a gift to the third person, meaning someone owes him this kav of saffron, and he's saying instead of paying it to me, pay it to this guy. And then that would, in theory, create a real kinyan that now person who has the saffron owes it to third person. But I didn't owe the saffron to that guy. So it's a matana from my perspective, but it's very much a cho from that guy's perspective. Yeah, I'm just pointing to Eddie as that guy. Yeah. But either way, Hachi Kamar Dvarim Halal Lo Nidnu L'Chazara. So the Gemara just clarifying, no. Kind of what we were saying the whole time. Rav maybe picked a funny lashon, but the point is he's saying at this point, once we did the Ma'amid Shlashim, it now I can't be choser, and now Eddie owes the saffron to Jack, right? But the Gemara says it's kind of weird because Amar Rav Chadatim, the Rav already taught us this halacha of a Ma'amid Shlashim. Why would he need to teach it a second time? Because he taught us the halacha we talked about on yesterday's daf. And it's kona even without a kinyan. So again, if we already know the halacha of Ma'amid Shlashim kana without a kinyan, why do we need Rav to teach us the halacha a second time in the context of this kav of saffron? So the Gemara answers, Imahi, if I only had the regular case of Ma'amid Shlashim, hava mina hani mili matana meruba. Maybe the only time Ma'amid Shlashim works, or at least it works and you don't need a kinyan, is dafka when it's a matana meruba. Ava matana muetes, but when you have a small gift like this thing of saffron, lo libai b'fanav kamash malan. Maybe I would think you could do it without a kinyan, even where Jack in our story isn't even here. Meaning, when it's a matana meruba, you need all three parties to be in the same room. But if it's a matana muetes, maybe I can affect this kinyan even without the ultimate recipient in the room. ArtScroll, I think, speaks out. Why would that be the case? So maybe you think like a matana meruba, you kind of need everyone there for whatever reason.
Since you're making, just getting gifts, you're making the big zokin for him. By you selling that.
Well, no one's really accepting anything. The saffron's not in the room right now. You know what I mean? So Eddie just owes it to me, and I'm just saying I'm kind of transferring my ownership. So it's not like the case. And by the way, we are going to get deep into Zachan Ladan Filafana pretty quickly. But normally it's a case of where, a shliach has money, and now the question is, who owns the money? Is it the ultimate Mikabel? Is it? But so I don't think this particular case is working within Zachan Ladan Filafana. Okay, either way, a story staying in the Ma'amid Shlashim theme. So Hanu Ginai, this sounds like it's some sort of co-op of gardeners of some sort. But the point is you have a group of gardeners, the Avid Chushbana Bahadi Adadi, so at the end of the day, they settled up. and Pash Chamesh Istri Zuzi Gabi Chad Minai. And it turns out that one of the co-op guys had 5 zuz more than he should have had. They realized that they kind of messed up somewhere along the way. So Amrele, so they said to this guy who had the extra money, Vinu Nehele Lamari Ara, and the Bach adds the word betaska. So give it to our landlord. Maybe it's some sort of property tax or some sort of amount of money that we owe him. But Ape Mari Ara, he happened to be in the room. So they said, this extra 5 zuz that you have, give it to the landlord. We all kind of owe him this money anyway. He's here, and through the din of my mishlashdan, he will now have the money. We don't even need a kinyan. But the Gemara says, Vikana mine, and they maybe belt and suspenders or whatever it is, they actually did a kinyan on top of the fact that they didn't even need to do the kinyan. But they did the kinyan. Okay. Lusof, this guy.
Rabbi did a Kenyan Khalifin.
Something like that, yeah. I don't know if it necessarily matters, but we'll go with Khalifin. Lusof, at the end of the day, Azul Avad Chushbana Bain Dilela Nashe, this sharecropper man goes home, does his own little cheshbon, and turns out Lo Pashka Lo Midi. They were all wrong. He didn't have the extra money. So here he gives the extra money, or at least is Machayev himself, to give the extra money to the landlord, but he didn't need to. So Asalek made Rav Nachman, he come before Rav Nachman, and Amar Lei, Rav Nachman says to this man, My Avilach, what can I do for you? First of all, we have the halacha of my mishlashon. So the guy was already kona, but hakana minachan, you actually did a proper kinyan. So Amar Lei Rav is hearing the story, and he says, Atu hai mikamar lo yahivna lo yavina. Right? This guy's not saying I don't want to pay him, right? Then you'd say you don't have a choice. The kinyan was made. The leka gabai kamer. He's saying this whole thing was a mistake. I don't have the money that everyone thought I had. So Amar Lei Rav Nachman said to Rava, in Cain, kinyan bitos. So the kinyan would have been bitos. The chol kinyan bitos chozer. So it's a bit of an anecdote, but bottom line is it wasn't a real case of my mishlashon. It was just a mistake. Therefore, the whole kinyan was done by mistake, and therefore, hopefully, this guy never ended up having to part with his money. Okay. Idmar, we are now now till the end of the paragraph, we're going to move into the sugya of holech kizachidami or holech lab kizachidami. So Idmar. Holech mana laploni. So let's say Ruvain tells the shliach, give money to Shimon shani chayav lo. So here's cash, give money to Shimon that I owe him. So again, Ruvain is the mishaleach in our story, Shimon is the mikabel, and shliach, we're just going to go with shliach. So he uses the specific lashon of holech. Holech mana laploni shani chayav lo. So Amar Rav says 2 chedushin. A chayav achar yuso. Ruvain is going to be chayav should there be some sort of onus on the derech, and therefore the money never makes it to Shimon. Rashi speaks out. It's important that this is an onus, so not some sort of shia on the case of the shliach. But the point is, something happens to the money. Ruvain is responsible, not the shliach. Not only that, but in balachzar eno choser. Notwithstanding the fact that that Ruvain is going to be responsible, once Ruvain gives the money to the shliach, he can't take it back, even though he's the one that's responsible. You think maybe if I'm responsible, so at least I should be able to nullify the shliach. He can't nullify the shliach. Once the money hits the hand of the shliach, it's over from Ruvain's perspective. Shmuel argues on the second point, and he says, Mitoch shechayev b'achar yuso, because of the fact that Ruvain is chayev, should an onus occur, in balachzar choser. If he wants to be choser, he is allowed to be choser. And now, Alan, this is what you were talking about earlier. Good question. Let's assume Shimon doesn't know about it, because we'll see some stories. So clearly, this is working from the perspective of Zachan Adam Shlo B'Fanav. Once the shliach, like, why would you ever say that someone can't be choser? Because once the shliach got the money, it's Zachan Adam Shlo B'Fanav, and therefore it's no longer Ruvain's to be able to take it back. The question is, what about it's Zachan Adam b'makom shechav la'acher? Ruvain is putting himself in a bad spot. Once Ruvain's responsible, it can take a week for the money to ultimately get to Shimon, right? And he can get mugged and whatever else happens. So in theory, if Ruvain's no longer able to be choser, what about Zachan Adam Shlo B'Fanav b'makom shechav ein Zachan Adam b'makom shechav la'acher? In theory, the shliach should not be able to be zocha the money on behalf of Shimon, because Ruvain is disadvantaged by this whole arrangement. So the question really is, how do we understand Shmuel? How do we understand Rav? Shmuel makes sense. Shmuel says, because of the fact that Ruvain has the achrayus, Ruvain can always be choser. We don't say Zachan L'Adam Shel B'fanav. But how do you understand Rav? So the Gemara says, Lema b'hakamiflagi. Maybe this is a machlokas. Mar savar holech kizachi dami. Umar savar holech is lav kizachi dami. Rav, I'll tell you, holds that when I use the lashon of holech, that's as if I'm basically telling the shliach, be zocha for the money, be zocha for Shimon. Once Reuven specifically tells the shliach to be zocha for Shimon, I'm basically saying I'm allowing this, even though I'm the one being disadvantaged, I'm allowing you to be zocha the money. Once the shliach is zocha the money on behalf of Shimon, Zachan L'Adam Shel B'fanav, now Reuven can't retract anymore. Because the only way I'd ever be allowed to retract is if I'm the disadvantaged party here, therefore we wouldn't say Zachan L'Adam Shel B'fanav. But if I'm giving you the express permission, I'm telling you holech, which means zocha on behalf of Shimon, I can no longer retract. And that's how the Gemara wants to understand the machlokas, Rav and Shmuel. Rav holds holech is kazachi dami, and Shmuel just disagrees. Says, no, I don't think holech is kazachi dami. Therefore, this is a regular case of ein zachan la'adam makam shachav la'acherim. And that's how the Gemara wants to understand this. But the Gemara says, lo, it's not muchach that way. Really, I'll tell you, the kuli almas holech kazachi dami. Really, everyone would agree that holech is kazachi dami. So how do you understand Shmuel? And this is just what they're arguing about. Mar savar lo amrinan migu, umar savar amrinan migu. And thankfully for us, it's not the complicated migu of like a taina of some sort. Migu, I could have said this, I'm going to say this. It's just much more simple. Migu, Rashi says, just means mito. Shmuel told us exactly the reason. He said, the reason why over here you can be choser is because of the fact, mito, that you have the achrayas. You were just never willing to, let this guy be zocha on behalf of Shimon. So it's really just exactly what Shmuel said. Shmuel said, because of the fact that I hold like Rav, that Reuven has the achrayas, therefore, I'm not going to let the shliach be zocha for Shimon. Tosfos, actually, if you look, Tosfos, Mar Savar Holech Lav Kazachid, I mean, he really has a question, like, what was even the Havmin? Shmuel told us very specifically what Shita was. He said, Mitoch, Shachai Bachruso, Imbalaxer, closer. Like, what was even the Havmin that this was a machlokas in Holech, Kazachi or not, but either way, Ayin Tosfos. But the bottom line is we have a machlokas, Rav, and Shmuel. In this arrangement, when Reuven says to Shliach, give this to Shimon, everyone agrees that Reuven still has the achrayas. The question is, can he be choser or not? And the Gemara says we have a brisa that seems to be supporting Rav's shita. Tani kavasei Rav. So the brisa is going to have 4 separate cases. Holech mana laponi shani chayiv lo. The first case is our case where he said, take this money to Ploni that I owe him. Or 10 mana laponi shani chayiv lo. Same idea, but instead of using the lashon of holech, he says 10. So just give the money that I owe him. Third case, holech mana laponi pikadon sheyesh li biyadi. So again, he uses the lashon of holech, but instead of saying give him cash, it's give him some pikadon. I didn't see this anywhere, but I think mana is just like the value of a mana. So it's like I have this, lawnmower, but it's worth a mana, and give the lawnmower to Shimon. And the last case is 10 mana laploni pikadon sheyesh li biyadi. So 4 different cases. 2 of them I use the lashon of holech. 2 of them I use the lashon of tain. 2 of them we're dealing with cash. 2 of them we're dealing with pikadon. But the bottom line is, in all 4 cases, the brisa says chayiv b'achar. So Reuven is still chayiv. Should there be an ones on the way? And
Not the shaliach.
Reuven, not the shliach, exactly. And v'im ba'lachtar eno choser, just like Rav said. And notwithstanding the fact that Rav has the Reuven has the responsibility, Reuven is not able to be choser. That which is what Rav said, not like Shmuel. That's the Tanya Kavasei to Rav. But the Gemara has just a slight issue with this whole brisa. The second and third case is where Reuven is telling the shliach, take this pikadon that I have and give it back to Shimon. The Gemara says pikadon. Why can't Shimon be like, excuse me, like I gave you my lawnmower. What gives you the right to give my lawnmower to some random shliach? Like cash is one thing. Cash is fungible. But a lawnmower, I mean, like, no, like I gave it to you. I trust you. What are you giving it out to other people? So Rav Zera said, I'll tell you the case, we have to say that Reuven is like a horrible person. And if Reuven's a horrible person, then anyone's better than Reuven. So frankly, the Shimon would be okay with Reuven giving it to anyone, right? Because Reuven himself is a kafir. Okay.
They gave it to the cutoff, so
Yeah, that's kasha namais. I don't actually know. But either way,
A kafrin is
someone who maybe would have Yeah, he's someone who has a reputation of maybe just denying the whole thing ever happened. So he's not the guy that you want responsible. So if we'll give it to anyone, it's better than him. Okay, so two different stories. Rav Sheshes Havale Asharta Desarbali B'Mechuza. Rav Sheshes apparently was in the business of selling cloaks on credit. So Sarbali, I think our scroll says is a cloak. Interesting. Look at the Rashi Sarbali. It says coat balaz. So maybe that's how you say cloak in French is quote. But either way, the point is Rav Sheshes, people owed him money in Mechuza. That's the bottom line. So Amarle Rav Yosef, so Rav Sheshes says to Rav Yosef, Bar Chama, Bahadi to us this, while when you're in Mechuza, I sinu in LA. Go to these people and get me my money. So Azil, Yavinule, so Yosef comes and they give him the money. But Amrile, but the people said to Rav Yosef, Nikni Minach, I want you to make a kinyan because we don't want to be responsible anymore. So we're giving you the money, but make a kinyan so that you're going to be responsible should anything happen. And Amar Lahu and Rav Yosef said, fine, that works. But Lasso Ishtam Lahu. But then Rav Yosef kind of reconsidered and he never did this kinyan and he never wanted any responsibility. So Kiyasal Kabeh, when Rav Yosef came back to Rav Sheshes, he told him the story. And Amar Le, Rav Sheshes said to Rav Yosef, Shaper Avad. It's good that you didn't take responsibility. The Lo Shavis Nafshacha Eved Lo Velishmav. There's a pasuk in Mishle that kind of compares someone who's a borrower to an Eved. And he said it's good that you didn't take the responsibility on yourself because, again, from this pasuk, it's better that you shouldn't be the Eved in this pasuk. Fine. Lishna Achrina, a little bit of a nuanced difference in how the story went down. Shaper about it, Rav Sheshes, Rav Yosef, good on you that you didn't accept the responsibility. Because again, Eved Lo Velish Malvin. I think the way Rashi explains is these guys that were already the borrowers, they're the Eved, and better that you stay with them being the Eved. Two different ways of basically getting out to the same point, which Rav Sheshes said, good on you for not accepting someone else's responsibility. They were the responsible parties, and thankfully, it sounds like in this case, nothing went wrong and Rav Sheshes got the money, but good on you, Rav Yosef, for not accepting the responsibility that you didn't have to accept. Fine. Second story, Rav Achi B'Rav Yoshia, Havale Ispika de Kaspa ben Naharda. Someone owed him a silver vessel in Naharda. Turn the page. So Amar Luhu, the Rav Dostai, Rav Yanai, the Rav Yossi Bar Keeper. So this, Rebbe said to his two Talmidim, he said, Hadida Asisu, Aisun Nele. When you guys are in Narda, go get me my silver cup. So Azul, Yavin LA, they went to go get the silver cup, and Amri Lahu, Nikni Minaifu. And same thing, these guys in Narda said, make a kinyan so that we're not going to be responsible for your silver cup. And Amri Lahu, these guys were a little bit smarter, and they said, "Lo, we're not doing that." So no. Amri Lahu, so then the guys in Narda said to these Talmidim, so Ahadrun Elam, so then give it back to us. And Rav Dostai, Rav Yanai, one of the two Talmidim, Amar Lahu, said, sure, take it back. Rabbi Yossi Bar Keeper, the other Talmud, Amar Lahu, lo, he said, absolutely not. I'm not giving it back. So Hava Kamatar really. So then these guys in Arda started beating up Rabbi Yossi Bar Keeper. And Amrulay, not only were they beating up Rabbi Yossi Bar Keeper, they said to the other Talmud, Chazimar Hechi Ka'avit. Look at what this guy's doing. He's not giving us back the silver cup. And Amar Lahu, so Rav Dostai, Rav Yanai, the other Talmud, said to the bad guys, Tov, Ramule, fine, keep beating him up. That's fine. Beat him up good. It's kind of a weird story. But bottom line, when Rabbi Yossi and Rav Dostai came back to their Rebbe, Amar Le, Rabbi Yossi, this is not like Rabbi Yossi, the Tana Rabbi Yossi, this is like an Amora or someone later on. He said to the Rebbe, Chazimar, Lo Masayid Lo Sayan, look at what this other guy did. It's not enough they didn't help me while these guys were beating me up. Ela Amar Lahu Nami Tav Ramula. He egged them on and he told them to continue beating me up. What's going on over here? So Amar Le, the Rebbe, said to both of these Talmidim, Amai Tavid Hachi, why did you do this? Meaning, I guess, directed at Rav Dostai, Rav Yanai, why did you not help Rabbi Yossi out? So Amar Le, he said, listen, what was going on over here? Osan b'nei Adam, Hein Ama, V'kovan Ama. They were these big, tall, strong guys, and their turbans are big and strong. Umid Midabren Mechatziayan. And they speak from their gut. They have they're imposing strong figures. Ushmotein Muhalan, and their names are scary. Arda, the Arta, Upeli Barosh, these are their names. Peli was at the head of them all. These guys are the mob or whatever it is. So Omer and Kvosu, if they say tie someone up, Kovkin, the guy gets tied up. Omer and Harogu, if these guys say kill someone, Horrigan, the guy's going to get killed. And he said a little, what's it called? He said, this is Rav Dostai talking. And ilu hargu es Dostai, had they killed Dostai, minasan liyanai abba bar kamosi. Who would give Yanai, my father, a son like me? I mean, I couldn't take that risk of being killed for a silver cup. So Amrle, so the Rebbe said to these guys, "B'nei Adam halalu krovu l'malchus Hussein." Are these guys, tight with government? Amrle Hain. They said, yeah, they are. Yesh lahem susin upradim sharatzim acharein. Do these guys have horses and mules that run after them? Amrle Hain. Yeah, they do. So Amrle ihachi shaper avad. So then, fine, very good. Don't risk your lives for a silver cup. We'll figure out a way to get the silver cup back. Either way, the bottom line is, we started the Sugya Amud Aleph. The question was, what?
Bottom line, don't deal with the bottom.
Exactly. The bottom line, for at least our purpose of today, which is always a good lesson, don't deal with the mouth. But for our purpose, we had a Sugya on Amud Aleph, is the solution of Holech. Is it Kazachi Dami or no? We thought maybe it was a Machlokas Rav and Shmuel. On Amud Aleph, we said that no, really, it wasn't Muchach. I can tell you that everyone agrees Holech is Kazachi Dami, and we understood the Machlokas a different way. So back to that. Holech mana leploni.
And this was a case where.
Well, we went on a few tangents with a few stories,
Yeah.
but yeah.
But the last one was a case where the shlichim were like mobsters.
Well, not the shlichim, the people holding on to the silver cup were the mobsters. The shlichim were just trying to not get killed.
Uh-huh.
Or at least one of the two shlichim. The other one didn't realize they were mobsters, and he got himself roughed up a little bit. Either way, holech mana leploni. So we have another case of Reuven saying to a shliach, take this cash and give it to Ploni. Now, for whatever it's worth, here it doesn't say sha'ani chayavlo, so maybe it's just a gift for whatever it's worth. But holech mana leploni, Reuven says to a shliach, take the cash and give it to Shimon. V'halach ubikshu v'lo matzu. Shliach comes to the town and he can't find him. Rashi says shemes. So Shimon is dead. What do we do? So we have conflicting brises. Tani Chada, one brisa says Yachzru l'mishalech. She'll bring it back to Reuven. But Tani Idach liyarshe mi shemishtenishtal chulo. No, don't give it back to Reuven. Give it back to the Yarshim of Shimon. So the Gemara says Lema b'hakamivli. Maybe this is goof of the machlokas. Demar savar holech hizichi umar savar holech la'afkisli. Maybe the brisa that says give it to the Yarshim of Shimon says that holech is kizchi. Like we were saying earlier, Zachan the Adam Shelo b'fanav. Once the shliachs get the money, Zachan the Adam, and therefore you don't give it back to Reuven, you give it to the Yarshim of Shimon. But the other Manda Amar, the other brisa says Holech is lav kisli. Therefore, this is not a case of Zachan the Adam Shelo b'fanav. If it's not a case of Zachan the Adam Shelo b'fanav, so then if Shimon's dead, so he was never Zochen it, so bring it back to Reuven. Maybe that's how we can understand the conflicting brises. But Amr Abba Bar Mamal, no, I'll tell you that's not the case. Kuli Alma Holech is Lavkisli. Maybe I'll tell you that both prices hold Holech is Lavkisli. So therefore, how do I understand the price that says give it to the Yarshim of Shimon? Below Kasha, Ha Bari and Ha B'Shtiv Meira. I'll tell you that one of the cases is dealing with a Bari, and one of the cases is dealing with a Shemera. The way Rashi explains this is when we say everyone agrees Holech is Lavkisli, that's only talking about when you have a Bari. But if you have a Shtiv Meira, then everyone's going to agree that to the extent he doesn't recover, for him, Holech is Kizchi. If you want to see Rashi inside, it's B'Shliv Meira, I don't know, a bunch of lines down from the skinny lines, Shekol Zman Shalo Chazar, so long as the guy doesn't recover, Varav Kichsuvim Uchim Isurin, the Holech Didei, and when a Shliv Meira says to a Shliach, Holech Manala Ploni, Zachihu, he is telling him be zocha on behalf of that guy, and therefore, if that guy happens to be dead, Shimon, then you give it to his Yarshim because Shimon already was zocha in it. So maybe that's how I'll explain the machlokas. So again, in theory, everyone agrees Holech is lav kisli. What's going on over here is we've got a shchivera. Rav Zvid Amar, he has a third way of understanding these brises. Hava ha b'shchivera. Maybe I'll tell you that both cases are a case of a Reuven is a shchivera, and therefore, really, it should always go to the Yarshim of Shimon. Okay, so then why does one of the brises say it comes back to Reuven? Had Eisei lemakabel b'shas matan mos, and had the Lesei lemakabel b'shas matan mos. The difference is, was Shimon alive when the matana was made? If Shimon was alive when the matana was made, so then he was zochen it, because holech of a shlemira is kizachi dami. And so long as Shimon was alive when Reuven made the matana, it should go to Shimon's yarshin. But if Shimon was already dead before Reuven even made the matana, then there was never even a zchi in the first place, because Reuven wanted to give this matana to Shimon. Shimon was dead, so then Shimon isn't zoche in it, so that it should go to his yarshin. It just comes back to Reuven. Rav Papa, kind of similar, but he says a fourth teretz. He says, Rav Papa Amar Haba Bari. Really, I'll tell you that Reuven is not a shemon. Reuven was a healthy guy, and therefore Holech is lav kizchi. So therefore, it makes sense why it comes back to Reuven. We have to understand the brisa that says it goes to the yarshin of Shimon, but ha demis mekabel b'chai nosein and ha demis nosein b'chai mekabel. Rav Papa says, I'll tell you, even a stranger, Okimta, that not only did Shimon die, Reuven also died. Notwithstanding the fact that he was a healthy person, Reuven also died. So it depends, when did Reuven die? If Reuven died before Shimon died, then I'll tell you, still carry out Reuven's wishes. Rashi explains, and the Gemara is going to say this mefurish, because there's another concept of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hametz. So if Reuven happened to die first, even though Shimon wasn't zocha from Zachan Adam Shel B'fanav, but there's a separate Indian over here of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis, and therefore we would give it to Shimon's yarshin. But if Shimon died first, while Reuven was still alive, then we would say Shimon was never zocha, because Reuven only meant to give it to Shimon, not to his yarshin. Therefore, Shimon was never zocha, and Reuven is still alive. Therefore, we wouldn't say mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis. So I'm going to drop confusing. But the bottom line is we have four separate ways of understanding these conflicting brisas, and we're not forced to say that the machlokas is whether holech is kizachi dami or not. So then, by the way, it's going to get a lot more confusing. But the Gemara says, one final shot here, lema holech kizachi tanahi. Maybe I'll tell you that this idea of whether holech is kizachi dami or not is gufa a machlokas tanai. So we're going to bring up brisa that has a number of shitas, and we're going to try to answer up the various shitas by saying maybe the machlokas tanaim is whether we say holech kizachi dami or not. So to Tanya, we have a brisa. Holech mana leploni. Reuven says to a shliach, give mana to Shimon. Shliach comes and Shimon's dead. So the first man number says yachru lemishalech. He says, okay, so the money should go back to Reuven. Meis mishalech. What if Reuven's dead? So Reb Nachman and Reb Yaakov Amru Yachtruli Yarshin Mishalech. Okay, so it doesn't go to Reuven because he's dead, but it should go back to Reuven's Yarshin. The Yeshom, remember the third band Amar says Li Yarshe Mi Shenishtalfu Lo. Doesn't go back to Reuven's Yarshin. It should go to Shimon's Yarshin. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Amar, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, otherwise known as Rabbi, right? Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Omer Mishum, Rabbi Yaakov Shamar Mishum Reb Meir. Mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis. It's a little unclear what he means. The Gemara is going to explain what that means. But that's the third shita. The Chachamim omrim yachloku. The Chachamim are like, listen, I don't know what's going on over here. Let's just split it, right? The Kan Amru in Bavel, we would say the halacha is kol mashiyir to shliach yasa. Just let the shliach use his discretion. Again, I don't know what's going on over here. The shliach will just decide. And Amar of Shimon Hanasi, another person says, al yadai hayamai. So this literal story happened in my town, but Amru Yachru Yarshin Mishalech, and I paskin it should go back to Reuven's Yarshin. This is like the second sheet in the brisa. So the bottom line is we have a lot of different opinions going on over here, but the Gemara says, "My la bak mivdi." Maybe I'll tell you this is what's going on over here. The Tanakama who said that the money should go back to Reuven, he holds holech lav kizachidami. I say that holech is lav kischi, therefore we shouldn't say zachan adam shalapana, and therefore if Shimon's dead, it should go back to Reuven. For Rav Nachman and Rav Yaakov, they held that not that it goes back to Reuven, because if Reuven might be dead, so it should go back to the Yarshim of Reuven. They also agree that holech is lav kischi. They also agree that holech is lav kischi, and therefore it shouldn't go to Shimon. But ba'apal gav demeis, they're just adding an additional wrinkle, and they're saying even if Reuven's dead, lo amrina mitzvah l'kayim divrei emes. Maybe you would think that okay, it should go back to Reuven, but if Reuven's dead, mitzvah l'kayim divrei emes, and it should go to Shimon. But they're just saying no. Not only do we not say holech kizechi, we also don't hold of mitzvah l'kaim divrei hames. And therefore, not only does it not go to Shimon, it goes back to Ruvain's Yarshim. The Yesh Omrim and the Yesh Omrim who say it should go to the Yarshim of Shimon, they hold holech kizechi. They argue and they say holech kizechi, and therefore Zachal and Shlomapanav, and it should go to Shimon, but if Shimon's dead, it should go to Shimon's Yarshim. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Amar Mishum Rabbi Yaakov Amar Mishum Rabbi Meir, he held mitzvah l'kaim divrei hames. So he says holech lav kizechi. He says in theory it should not belong to Shimon. Ozzy, we're going to try to finish the parak, okay? Okay. He says in theory holech is lav kizechi, and therefore it should go back to Ruvain. Mihu heicha demis, or Ruvain is dead. Amrina mitzvah l'kaim divrei hames. He holds that it's a mitzvah l'kaim divrei hames, and that's why it goes to Shimon, or at least to Shimon's Yarshim. V'chachamim omrim yachloku, because masafkalu, they don't know what the halacha is, so they say, right, mama the mother will suffix just cholkin. V'kan amru, and in Bavel we said shuda adif. They said leave it to the shliach's discretion, because again they just don't know what to do. Rav Shimon Hanasi, Rav Shimon Hanasi is just saying, he's just telling us a ma'aseh shahaya. This happened in wherever he lived, and that's what we did. But the bottom line is, we can understand the various shitas in this brisa by saying that they're arguing whether holech is kizechi dami or holech is lav kizechi dami, right? So again, when we kind of opened up this stop, that was one of the questions, right? The sugya of holech kizechi. First, we thought it was a machlokas Rav and Shmuel. We said, no, it's not muchach. Then we said maybe it's a machlokas Tanaim. Earlier, again, we said no. I'll tell you that everyone holds holech is lav kizechi. And now we're trying a third time, and we're saying maybe to answer up this complicated, goofy brisa, maybe that is goof of the machlokas. Some of the Tanaim hold holech kizechi dami. Some of the Tanaim hold holech is lav kizechi dami, and that's how we'll understand this this machlokas. But again, the Gemara says maybe I'll tell you it's not muchach. Really, I'll tell you lo bebari. Really, I'll tell you that everyone's going to agree that in a case of a bari, everyone agrees that holech is lav kizechi dami. So what's going on in this story over here in this brisa? We're dealing with a guy, Ruvain, who is a shchevmera with plukta Rabbi Lazar v'Rabbanan kimifligin. They're arguing goof of the machlokas of Rabbi Lazar and the Rabbanan. So I will hand up. I will admit, until I saw this yesterday, I thought that the halacha of a shchevmera, that he can be makna stuff to people without doing an actual kinyan, was just like a halacha that we all knew. Apparently, that's not the case. It's actually the machlokas between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Lazar that we're about to learn right now, and that's how we're going to answer up this entire brisa. So it's not. We have a Mishnah. This is at the end of Baba Basra. Reuven. It's always going to be Reuven, the person who's giving the matana. Okay. Right. He's the one that's the shchemera. So it's not. We have a Mishnah at the end of Baba Basra. Hamachalik nechasav al pid. Someone is handing out his possession without a kin. He's just doing it al pid. Rabbi Lazar Omer echad bari the echad masukman. It doesn't matter if you're a bari or if you're a shchemera. Nechasim sheyesh lehen achrayis. Nechasim like real estate, avadim, things that are quote yesh lahem achrayis. Nicknamed the kesef shar ubechazaka. They require a specific type of kinyan, whether it's kesef shar ubechazaka. And metaltalin, a nicknamed ela b'mashicha. They use a different type of kinyan. But the bottom line is, I don't care if you're a shchemera, I don't care if you're a bari, you always require a kinyan. That's Shittas Rabbi Lazar. Obviously how we paskin, something that's more familiar to us. Elu nicknamed ba'amira. When it comes to a shchemera, I don't care what the property is. I don't care if it's real estate. I don't care if it's avadim. I don't care if it's cash. You don't need a kinyan. You can be konet with a mira alone. And Amrullah the Chachamim said to Rabbi Lazar, I'll prove to you that a shchemera doesn't require a kinyan, because Ma'isa iman shel b'nei Rochel. I'll tell you a story with the mother of the b'nei Rochel. Rochel, ironically, is a man's name. So this is the mother of the children of a man by the name of Rochel. She was a shchemera. She was sick. But Amra, she said, Tinasin kibinti labiti, and she said, I have this very valuable piece of jewelry, give it to my daughter. That's a chiddush, right? Because mitin, Yerusha should really go to the sons, shouldn't go to the daughter. But she said, as a shchemera, give this to my daughter. The Gemara tells us this is very, very valuable, and therefore they wouldn't just be mavater, right? But the bottom line is, Umesa, she died, and the Chacham still gave it to the daughter, even without a kinyan. So the Chacham were trying to prove to Rabbi Elazar clearly from the story we see that a shchiv mira, even without a kinyan, can be makna stuff to the daughter. That's why this went to the daughter, because she made the kinyan while she was a shchiv mira. Had she not been a shchiv mira and there wasn't a kinyan, we would have said the kinyan was never chal. Therefore, she owned the brooch, the mother, and when she died, it should go to the sons. It shouldn't go to the daughter. But Amr Lahem, Rabbi Elazar said back to the Chachamim, B'nei Rochel Tikra Aminim. He cursed them. These are horrible people. We can't bring any rise from anything they did. The way Rashi explains, he says, presumably the Chachamim, just no one was even medactic in the whole story because we don't even want to say their name in Beis Medrash, right? Rashi explains that these guys, you would put thorns in their vineyard, which apparently Rabbi Elazar holds is Kalayim. Because they did Kalayim before Hesia, it's like no one even wanted to deal with them, and therefore don't bring me rise from the story. No one ever looked into it. Whatever they did, meaning they don't have a stamp of approval from the Chachamim. What they did was probably wrong. That's what Rabbi Elazar basically saying, don't bring me rise. All we really needed from that machlokas was to say that there's a machlokas between Rabbi Elazar and the Chachamim, whether a shchiv meira is required to make a kinyan or whether he's not required to make a kinyan. So the Tanakama in our story, who said that when Ruvain sends money with the shliach to Shimon, and Shimon's dead, and it comes back to Ruvain, Tanakama, Rabbi Elazar, he says Ruvain was a shchiv meira, but he holds like Rabbi Elazar, who says that even a shchiv meira requires a kinyan. Here there wasn't a kinyan, therefore it comes back to Ruvain. Rav Nassan and Rav Yaakov Nami Rabbi Elazar. Did I skip a line? Sorry. Nami Rabbi Elazar. The second shita that says it also goes to the yarshim of Ruvain, if Ruvain's dead. They also posted like Rabbi Elazar that even in a case of a shliv meira, you need a kinyan. But they're just adding a wrinkle by saying afal gav de mis. Even if Ruvain dies, lo amrina mitzvah l'kaim divrei hames. Maybe it'd have a half minute to say that if Ruvain's dead, then give it to Shimon because of a mitzvah l'kaim divrei hames. And they say no, we don't even hold to that. The yesh omrim and the yesh omrim, we say it goes to the yarshim of Shimon kerabanan. They say shliv meira doesn't require a kinyan, and therefore it should go to the Yarshim of Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the next shita in the thing, they said mitzvah l'kaim divrei hames. He held Rabbi Elazar. He held that a shchiv meira is like Rabbi Elazar, and therefore there was never a kinyan. And in theory, the money should go back to Ruvain. But mihu hecha the miss. But when Ruvain dies, amrina mitzvah l'kaim divrei hames. We say that there's a mitzvah to l'kaim divrei hames, and that's why the money goes to Shimon's Yarshim. The Chachamim omrim yachloku. They just are confused, so they're like. Yachloku, they don't know what's going on. Misfeka, misafkalahu. V'kan amru, and in Babel we said shuda adif. They said leave it up to the shliach's discretion again because we don't know what to do. Rav Shimon Hanasi, and Rav Shimon Hanasi is just telling us a story. He's just telling us that this happened, and what we did was we said like the second people, we gave it back to the Yarshim of Ruvain. So just to finish the parak, that's kind of the end of this. Just finishing the parak. 1 point. Ibayalahu, Rav Shimon HaNasi. Nasi who? Mishmei de Nasi Kamar. This person, Rav Shimon HaNasi. The Gemara says that we don't really know of such a person, Rav Shimon HaNasi. Was there a Nasi whose name was Rav Shimon? Or was this a Rav Shimon that's saying something in the name of a Nasi? The way our scroll, he actually added a layer, which I thought was very good. Rav Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, otherwise known as Rebbe, his father's name is Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, and he was a Nasi. And Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi also had a son, Shimon. Now, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Yehuda's father, he was a Nasi. But our scroll, and I don't know who he brings down, he brought down one of them, Farshin. He said it's not muchach. It wouldn't make sense that the Bryce would be referring to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's father because he wouldn't quote the father later in the Bryce. So if that's who we were referring to, it would have been Rabbi Shimon HaNasi first, and then Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. So it can't be that Rabbi Shimon HaNasi is referring to Rebbe's father. You're right. He also probably wouldn't refer to him. And his son, Rav Shimon, we have no record of him being a Nasi. So the question is, who is this Rav Shimon Nasi? Is this someone that we just don't know about, that there was a Rav Shimon somewhere along the line that was a Nasi? Or is it a Rav Shimon that's quoting a Nasi? So Tashma, the Amar Rabbi Yosef, halacha Rav Shimon HaNasi. Rabbi Yosef Paskin, halacha Rav Shimon HaNasi. And the Gemara is saying, maybe you could tell me that the Brisa was magumgum a little bit, but there's no way that when Rabbi Yosef is quoting a halacha, he must be saying Rabbi Shimon HaNasi. he wouldn't be saying Rav Shimon saying it in the name of a Nasi. But the Gemara is saying, like, why are you making that assumption? I don't know. Maybe he's just quoting a brisa, right? Nasi, who was Rav Shimon actually a Nasi? Oh, the Kamar Mishmei de Nasi. And the Gemara cryptically finishes Teku, which you would think this is not a great use of Teku, right? Normally Teku is like a halachic matter. Like, what do we do? I don't know. Teku. This is some historical thing, but either way, the Gemara ends Teku, we don't really know. Rupa, Amar Rabbi Yosef, halachic Rav Shimon HaNasi. Bottom line is Rabbi Yosef paskin like Rav Shimon HaNasi. In the story of Shimon HaNasi paskin, that this cash goes back to Ruvain's Yarshim. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. How are we paskening that the cash should go back to Ruvain's Yarshim? V'kaimalan divrei shchev meira kichsuvin v'chemesumrin damo. That would be like if we pass like Rabbi Lazar, but we don't. We pass like Chachamim, and if to the extent that Reuven was a shlemera, the money should go to Shimon. It should never go to Reuven's Yarshim. So the Gemara answers Rav Yosef Mokin Lavabari, who said that the story is a shlemera. That was one of the ways of understanding. But maybe Rav Yosef will tell you that the story was never a shlemera. Therefore, Reuven was not a shlemera, and therefore the cash comes back to Reuven. But the Gemara persists, and the Gemara says, "Bahali Yarshim Mishaleach Kama." Reuven's clearly dead, right? Because it's going back to his Yarshim. And if Reuven's dead, the Kaim Alon, we also pass on Allah Maisa, mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames. So if Reuven's dead, why are we giving the money to Reuven's Yarshim? We should anyway give it to Shimon because mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames. So the Gemara answers, Tani yachzru l'mishaleach. Edit the price a little bit. Don't say that Shimon Hanasi said it should go back to Reuven's Yarshim. He should say it went back to Reuven himself, meaning Reuven never died. He wasn't a shlemera. Not only was he not a shlemera, he never even died. And Shimon was just paskening like the first Tanakama in that